Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Apodaca. I'm an OKR coach and agile thought leader. I'm also the president and founder of Apodaca Consulting. At Apodaca Consulting, we help our clients accelerate profitability and reduce operational costs using a powerful combination of objectives and key results, Scrum, and AI. On average, our clients achieve 3 to 5x in annual recurring revenue, accelerate go-to-market by up to 50%, and an increase in efficiency by 40%. I'm also your host of The Execution Gap, a podcast that explores why business strategy fails and how the top 10% of leaders close that gap. And today I'm joined by Daniel Alb. Daniel's the VP of Product at Revieve, a company pioneering AI-powered personalization in the beauty, skincare, and wellness space. Daniel brings over 15 years of experience spanning branding, e-commerce, and product development. He started his career running a branding agency for a decade before moving into digital product development, where he helped scale e-commerce businesses by as much as 10x growth in a single year. At Revieve, Daniel oversees product strategy and delivery, bringing together design, user experience, and advanced AI to deliver deep personalization at scale. He's passionate about bridging client needs with end user experience, balancing strategic priorities with day-to-day execution, and shaping the future of personalized digital commerce. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Fantastic to be here, Jim. Thanks for inviting me and looking forward to a great conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before we jump in, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your journey in terms of where you are today and your role at Revive?
You did a fantastic intro. I wish I had that. I'll probably steal that from you and maybe use it some other time. But yeah, no, I think you mentioned a lot of the story. Ultimately, I didn't have a career master plan as much as probably a lot of people don't have that. I don't know if it's a good thing or not. As you progress from one role to another, you kind of have some intentional big moments when you want to pursue certain things. And for me, that was leadership. And I knew from very early on that leadership was something that was very important. And to kind of develop that leadership and the leadership skills, it was all about kind of leaning into some kind of strengths that I had or things that I learned even in my childhood, like storytelling that I got from my grandpa and empathy that I got from my mother, and leaning into those and also kind of building up some of the skills that are important to kind of get leadership going and in a way that is efficient and ultimately delivers the results for you. But all of those roles, as mixed as they sound, they kind of compound over time and bring together this kind of wealth of experience that you can use. And I think ultimately leadership is something that can't be, let's say, jumped or leaped. You kind of need to go through it. You need to build it up one step at a time. And that's one of the most important things. I think going back to, what I was saying, the storytelling and the empathy pieces together with communication, I think those are really important things that you need to kind of bring and develop as a leader. Ultimately, everything else were items that you had to go through. I had to go through to build up to where I am at the moment. And just talking about the role at Revive, it's a super exciting role. I've been building AI products in my previous role as well, so it's really interesting to kind of dive into it. But with everything that happens these days with AI, it's just an inflection point that we live, and it's super exciting. I'm super excited to take all of those learnings and bring them, put them in the product, but ultimately not forgetting about the humans, right? Because what we build, if they're not really solving problems for people, and they're a bit of an exercise that might be exciting from a technology perspective or might be exciting from a different perspective, but ultimately it needs to solve a problem in order to kind of build a viable business. And ultimately, the way you do that is essentially by trying to balance vision with some discipline and kind of coming back to this podcast with focused execution.
Yeah, no, amen to that. And and we'll get into the story a little bit more and just the success that you all are having. But the connection with customer. I was actually talking with a client yesterday, and one of the things that we were discussing is how sometimes as builders, we get married to the thing that we want to build, and without really understanding, are we solving a customer problem? And I've worked on many projects where we've built these cool, exciting things with very little user adoption. And so it's great that you're connecting with the customer experience. And so you've had an incredible journey from running your own branding agency to leading product at Revive. What have been the biggest lessons along the way, and how did those experiences shape the way you approach product leadership today?
I mean, I mentioned storytelling, and it's one of the things that was important to me since early childhood. I remember sitting with my grandpa. He was a fantastic storyteller. He was making up these incredible scenes that never happened, but he was telling them with such conviction that we as kids just believed them. And storytelling is a piece that kind of I can link back to all my roles. And it's so important to have that clarity of communication, but not in a dry way, right? You need to have a story that is actually believable. I'm not saying making up a story the way my grandpa did,
Yeah.
but it's about really understanding the arc of where the problem starts, how are we going to solve it, and how do you create ultimately clarity and trust for people and clarity for your own team that is going to execute the product, and then trust on the side of the humans that are going to use your product. If they don't have the trust that and the conviction that ultimately that product is going to solve a certain problem for them, they're not going to use it. So essentially, all the efforts that you put in building a fantastic experience are going to be futile, right? And it's going back to that problem of if there's a tree in the woods that falls down, doesn't make a sound if there's nobody there to hear it. It's the same with the experience. If you've created a fantastic user experience, but nobody's actually using it, is that a fantastic user experience? And I think ultimately it goes back to that. And the key point there is the trust in the solution and the solution being used. And that is across the board or any role, right? Be it a design leadership role that I had, or the product role that I had, or entrepreneurial role that I had in earlier on in my career. And everything goes back to how do you connect with humans, be it a client, be it a customer, be it a user, connecting with them at the human level to really understand what's underneath, really understanding the problem, and then creating a story that actually tells them how the problem is solved, and then them believing it, but also seeing it in action.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think establishing that trust is so key with customers. Trust is one of those things that is earned. It's not given, right? And you want to establish that with your customers. And I think by telling that story, you're connecting with them on a human level, right? And you're able to
Absolutely.
yeah, you're able to relate with what they're experiencing, and that solution that they're looking for, and why they've come to you, So I love that. And I love the grandpa story, My mom used to have this saying that the older we get, the wiser our parents become. And it finally started to make more and more sense as I got older. But yeah, she had some great stories and learned so much from my mom. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of stories from my grandpa. He was a fantastic storyteller. I have a lot of things that I learned from my mom as well. And one of the things that she was saying, and you opened up this door now, Jim, so we have to go
Sure.
down this road a little bit. One of the things she was saying, I remember, we're Sunday going to church, and commenting on everything, right? Coming back home, and it was like, well, this is not good, and not that's not good, and here's everything that's wrong with everything. And she would say, well, if you think you could do better, just do it. And what stuck with me over time was this: if you think you could do better, just do it. And there's a couple of things that come, that I took from there. Essentially, it's one, a deep analysis of the problem, right? Because to be able to say, I am able to provide a better solution, or I am able to do something better, means that I understand the problem at a deep level. So I'm able to analyze that problem at a deep level to say, well, that's not the right solution. This is. And then the other one is propensity for action. So if you've done the analysis, if you understood that you can provide a better solution, then action it and then see the results. Now, ultimately, that solution is going to live or die on the results it delivers. So, on that side, essentially, you're going to have to live and see if the solution is actually better. But it kind of created for me this path from analysis to implementing or building a new solution, propensity for action, actually implementing that, and then live and see, test your solution, see if it kind of survives the interaction with the user.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wayne Gretzky is quoted as saying, "You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take," right? And and that's where it all starts is
Fantastic.
by building something and iterating on it and improving on it. I mean, the solution that you put out, you don't know if anyone's going to consume it, but you're going to learn from that experience and you're going to iterate on it. So, no, couldn't agree more. So, Daniel, Revive operates at the intersection of AI, e-commerce, and personalization. For listeners who may not know Revive yet, what makes your platform different from others in the market?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, personalization has to be grounded in that trust that you get with the user. And this is, again, we talk about AI, and AI is an inflection point that brings another level of challenge when we're talking about that interaction between the user and a platform. And providing the level of trust is of utmost importance. Our platform covers the full beauty digital solution for the full beauty spectrum. We have AI assistants for skin diagnosis, skin analyzers, AI makeup advisor, foundation matching, virtual try-ons. It's the full gamut. We use more than 200 data points for facial analysis. We deliver accurate, inclusive, and explainable personalization across all skin tones and hair types. We use zero and first party data that we get from the users, but we need to make sure then that the personalization that we provide at the back of it is privacy compliant and safe for the user. And more recently, we've launched probably one of the first generative AI solutions for beauty, which enables conversational assistants to guide, educate, and inspire our users. So it's a full spectrum of digital solutions for beauty. It's cross category essentially, but ultimately what it relies on is on the trustworthiness of the solution that we provide. Personalization cannot, and I'm going back to the trust thing that we mentioned before, personalization cannot exist without the trust, right? If the users are going to question it and say, well, I'm not sure that is true, they're definitely not going to buy the products that you recommend. And so ultimately for us, the differentiation is delivered through the trust that we create for the user, to the clarity of the communication. Being an advisor, it's at the crux of how we interact with our users. We're developing fantastic solutions with the help of AI, generative AI. Ultimately, what we envisage is solutions where you're interacting with an advisor as you would interact with a human advisor. And that's kind of the vision that we're taking, and we're building towards that. But understanding that ultimately we're talking to humans, we're interacting with humans, we're solving a problem for humans. And that problem is deep and personal, right? It's you want to take care of yourself. Your skin is part of yourself. You want to elevate your confidence. You're using your makeup, skin solutions, hair solutions. Everything kind of comes back to the fact that we're solving something that is deeply personal for the user. And it's not just personalized, it's deeply personal.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. And leading up to this conversation, I was doing my research and just it's fascinating with what you all are doing at Revive. And who would have thought that we're using AI in the beauty space? But AI is just everywhere these days. And I guess vertical is no different, right? And so it's really interesting to see how we're applying AI in that context.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any. Well, I don't know, maybe in the building construction space. I'm not sure. We probably still need plumbers. which is great. I'd rather talk to a plumber than to a robot at this stage. But outside of that, I think there's no kind of space that AI won't touch or is not touching at the moment. I think it's a huge technological shift. And, we've heard people are a lot smarter and a lot more important than me saying that, comparing this to the technical revolution back in the day, but, or the technological revolution, industrial revolution. But ultimately, we need to be aware of how this will impact or try to preempt how this will impact what we're building at the moment. And we need to adapt to that. I don't think anybody can continue building the way they have built, given the changes that AI brings to the industry. I don't think that you can stay on the same course that you had. And now AI is not a new thing, right? LLMs are not a new thing. They've been around for quite some time. But I think what we see changing is the hockey stick kind of transformation that it brings to the industry. So you have to adapt to that. Digital beauty industry is no stranger to it. It has to adapt to everything that is brought to the table. And ultimately, we're embracing it because it's exciting in terms of opportunity that it brings to consumer interaction and how humans interact with the technologies that we build.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm kind of a late adopter to AI. I'm not going to lie. I was a little apprehensive at first of, interfacing and interacting with this thing that is kind of living and breathing on the other end of my computer, right? And it's learning from me. And it was the thought of engaging with something like that was a little bit scary, but I use ChatGPT on a regular basis now, and it has become very much a thought partner in what I'm doing to build my consultancy. As an independent consultant, I don't have the luxury of a co-founder that I can bounce ideas off of, or just someone that can give me some feedback on what I'm doing. Partnering with AI in that sense has helped tremendously. So I'm glad I finally took that leap and adopted. Yeah, I was like I say, I was a little bit apprehensive at first.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people are going to be there, and like anything that's as tectonic as especially LLMs. I mean, AI has been around for decades now, so it's not that, it's what changed in the interaction, right? And that we have with AI and its ability to essentially communicate and mimic human communication. So it feels differently because we interact with it in a different way. I think a lot of people are going to be still are apprehensive in interacting with it, apprehensive in adopting it in their line of work. I mean, it's coming no matter what. So usually I like to be at the forefront of something that I see it's an unstoppable kind of event and trying to, I think from a product perspective, I think that's important as well. Understanding what happens to the industry, trying to prevent how it transforms the way we work, what we deliver, the type of products that we build, and then really trying to explore the excitement of the opportunities it unveils. I mean, there's probably at this point a lot more unknowns that knowns in regard to how fast it will develop and how much it will change our lives. But I think the impact of it has started to show, especially in the tech industry, that kind of changed radically since since the development of kind of the newer models that actually generate impact on various different levels, not just in kind of on the consumer side of things in what we build, but in how we build things and how fast we build, in how much effort and resource, how human resources we need to build things.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think we could probably spend the entire conversation on AI, but want to jump forward to a few questions that I have. So when we spoke previously, one challenge you touched on is balancing long-term product strategy with client requests, especially from enterprise customers. How do you prioritize product development and, when necessary, say no in a way that still strengthens the client relationship?
Yeah, and I mentioned, I think on that conversation, Jim, the this thing, the 50 shades of saying no, right? So, and it's one important piece that as product leaders we have to bring to the table because ultimately I think the lack of clarity can just drown us in good ideas. And I'll tell the story as a side note, but I remember it was earlier on in my career. I was running the branding agency that you mentioned and had a friend that wanted to sell me an idea. He said, I had this fantastic idea. It's going to be tremendous. If you build this thing, this product is just going to be so good. You're going to make so much money of it. I'm going to tell it to you, but how much do you think it costs, right? What are you willing to pay for it? And at that point, I had to be honest and say, well, it means nothing to me. It's just an idea. Everybody has good ideas left, right, and center. Ultimately, what differentiates an idea for a product is execution. To be able to execute, you need to have focus and clarity and to understand what are the things that you need to build today, what are the things that you need to build tomorrow, and what are the things that you shouldn't build at all. And when we're approaching client demands, especially in an enterprise context, this is extremely important, right? Because that client is very important to you. They believe that they're important to you. They're trying to leverage the fact that they're important to you, and they will make the demand as is, a make or break relationship type of a demand. And ultimately, most of the time, in my experience, it isn't. And navigating that client demand is super important. What I learned though is that if you're developing trust with your partner, and if you're presenting the bigger picture, the vision, the context with clarity, and if you're operating on a level of trust, then they will understand what you're saying because you're not saying no to the demand that they have, leaning into the storytelling and essentially explaining to them the vision that you're trying to build with your product. And most of the time, their demand is just one way of solving a problem and going back to really understanding what problem are we trying to solve and solving that in a way that the product maybe brings to the table is one way of approaching it. But most of the time, they'll be happy with you saying no if you explain it in the context of the vision that you have for your product and the context of how their problem is positioned to you. They need to feel that their needs aren't ignored, that their needs are integrated into a bigger vision. And that clarity builds more trust over promising something to the client.
Well, and I love that about telling the vision of the product, right? And explaining that with your client. And once I finally learned to say no in my career, and to clients, I think that was one of the most powerful things that that I could have ever learned, to be honest with you. But again, to explain to the client why the no and what the vision is for the product, I think that's very powerful in being able to, to communicate that with them and to maintain that trust with your client, So I love that.
I think they need to understand what the product that you're offering doesn't do as much as they need to understand what it does do. And this is important, right? Because obviously, any probably client that you're going to have is going to try to limit the number of partners that they're going to work with, right? And try to extract, as all of us or most of us would, try to extract the most out of a relationship. I mean, they're investing money in your product, and they need to understand what that investment is for. And once you can explain very clearly the ROI of that investment, but also what is not included in that ROI, they'll be happy to work with you. But as I said, it's important for them to understand what the product doesn't solve as much as it's important for them to understand what the product does solve for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then So much of that goes back to the company's strategy, right? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And I know that you all mentioned, in our when we previously spoke that you use objectives and key results at Revive. Question I would have there is how has that framework shaped the way your teams operate and make decisions?
I mean, ultimately, it links the big vision of where the company is going with ultimately the day-to-day work of an engineer or an account person. It's super important to have clarity over where your company is going. And also it's important to understand how that trickles down to, the email I'm sending today or the roadmap we're creating this week at Revive. How are they linked together? And ultimately, a roadmap, features that we're going to build, products that we're going to bring to the table, problems that we're going to solve, if they don't link back to the objectives of the company, to really understanding where we're going and what we're trying to develop, they're going to not be rooted in reality, right? So I can go to my leadership team and propose a direction that is rooted in market research and talking to the customers, and it's, buttoned down to the T in great arguments. If they're disconnected from the objective of where the company is going, it's not going to make any sense. And it'll be very easily batted down. If I have a clear understanding of the objectives and I can link everything that we're trying to do from a product perspective, from an execution perspective, back to the company goals and where we're going, at that point, everybody understands exactly the path that we need to. Also links very clearly to the objectives of everybody in the company, links very clearly to what we're building essentially on a day to day. And also, we're able to put value um, on the things that we're building and the expectation of impact, right? Because ultimately, if we assign value to something that we build, we know what the assumption of impact is going to be, and we'll be able to measure it to say, well, this has been successful or not. But it gives that clarity. I'm going back to the idea of clarity that beats complexity every time. And ultimately, that is, for me, the key core of using the OKR as a framework is just reducing the complexity that we have to deal on a daily basis to the clarity of the action that we need to take today and tomorrow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing that I love about OKRs and working with my clients to implement the framework is that one of the things that we get from it is the clarity, right? But it's the clarity in terms of what we want to achieve, but it's also the clarity in terms of the stuff that is out of scope. We've made a commitment that we are not going to work on XYZ because we're going to focus on A, B, and C, and getting down to that day to day of the individual that is responsible for that delivery, the autonomy that they have with being able to say no to a certain request. And I've seen it time and time again with product development teams and engineering teams where they've got this 2 week sprint that they're working on. And they've got this backlog of things that they're trying to achieve, but they're constantly facing impediments from, this a certain leader that says, okay, can you just kind of give me this report? I know you're working on all that other stuff, but I need this report now, or I need something that is really out of scope for what the team is trying to achieve. And the autonomy that objectives and key results provides at that individual level. I think it's amazing. And I love it when I work with my clients and they have that, that aha moment and that light bulb turns on in terms of, okay, yeah, this is what we're focused on and we're not going to focus on any of that other stuff. And so I love that.
I mean, the 50 shades of saying no, right? We mentioned that before. It definitely offers the team protection to focus on the things that matter most now. Obviously, with a clear understanding of what we're going to do next. And as you said, the things that we're not going to touch. And that is ultimately coming together from a dialogue that we have as teams and to the commitment that we need to have as a company from the top all the way to the bottom. And that's an important piece. But as you said, the autonomy and the comfort that it gives teams to understand that they work linked to something that has been decided as a company and that we're not going to derail from the focus that we've established for ourselves. And that focus means we know what we said yes to, we know what we say no to. It's super important. Outside of that, of course, you're always going to have these kind of left side of, lateral kind of requests and things that are going to come in. But I mean, if you have prepared a vision and a strategy that is grounded in the reality of what happens in the market, in the consumer world, you should have a pretty good argument to understand how they either fit into what you're trying to do for the future, or they don't fit, and then it's an easy no as an answer to that.
Yeah, well, and I love that you also called out the assumed outcomes, right? I mean, really, it's, this is a hypothesis that if we do A, B, and C, we may achieve this outcome, right? And it's one of those things that I preface when I work with my clients on OKRs, that just because we have this target doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to achieve it, right? What we've established here is we've had this planning and this conversation that says, in theory, we're going to do all of these things, and we expect that we're going to achieve that outcome. And in some cases, we hit it. Sometimes in cases, we don't, right? And there's still value in missing the goal. It's about what did we learn, and what could we do differently, and how should we do things differently. I love that it's the expected outcome, but there's no guarantee to it, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you've put it so well there, Jim. Ultimately, I think it goes back to how it's communicated and understood. If it's communicated and understood as a fait accompli, then the expectations might fall down on the fact that the results have not been achieved. I think if they're positioned well as an assumption of impact that needs to be tested, and ultimately nothing really survives the interaction with the user, you're not going to get there, or you're going to have your expectation kind of disappointed. So I think it's super important what you mentioned, right? It's very important to be communicated as assumptions that we worked on. Now, sometimes you have a pretty good understanding of everything, and the assumptions might stand on you might be able to kind of really understand the results better. In some cases, the assumption is going to be wider and you're going to have less confidence in the results. But as you said, you still need to go and try it, especially if you have good inputs from either the market or the user side that there's something that you need to explore. And then you have a commitment from internal teams. If we come back to AI and the discussion that we had on AI and AI agents, let's say, that are dominating the conversations in tech these days, there's an assumption that a lot of the behavior that we have as users from, let's say, interacting with e-commerce environments, right, are going to change. But it's an assumption. We see some signs from the market that AI agents for e-commerce are delivering results, but we don't know yet how the behavior of the user is going to change
Right.
from what we do at the moment, the way we order things by clicking buttons, to the expectations that we're going to speak into a device and things are going to be delivered to us. All of them are possible at the moment. The gap between them is the actual user behavior transitioning from one pattern to another. Now, when you're going to assume a big bet as a company and say, well, 12 months from now or 24 months from now, people are going to buy things by just speaking into a device as opposed to clicking buttons. It's a massive assumption.
Yeah.
It's a big bet. Now, if you're going to commit to it, you have to build things in such a way that you know how to probably go forward or go backwards, right? While if you're going to, let's say, change the color of a button today, and expect some results. And we've done that. I've done that in my career and seen 80% increase in results by changing the color of a button.
Yeah.
There's test on that. There's a lot of information that will already give you high confidence on that outcome, right? But there's two completely different paths that you need to approach in two different ways because the expectation of the outcome in one case versus the other widely different. So it's just the approach, I suppose, that you have to take in those cases are different, but nothing guarantees ultimately the result, right? So you still have to implement that and make it go through the grind of interacting with the user.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. So kind of looking ahead, what's next for Revive in the next 12, 18 months? I mean, what's the big opportunity that you're most excited about?
I mean, conversational interfaces, driving everything through a conversational interface an exciting bet that we're exploring, right? At the moment, you have a certain way of interacting with our advisors. They feel very friendly. They're super user friendly. It's very easy to interact with them. Click up buttons, do a skin analysis by enabling the camera on your device, taking very quickly a skin scan, and then seeing the results in the recommended products that we put in front of you. It's a streamlined experience, but we believe there's something in how the user behavior will change in the e-commerce context. That is an exciting thing for us to explore. How would you do that fully from a conversational interface and maybe then voice activated in the future? I mean, you'll still have to probably take or enable your camera and do a skin analysis, and we'll do all of that magic behind the scenes and do a full report on how your skin looks at the moment. So that magic still happens, but how you're going to interact with the tool is where the excitement stands for us and what we're exploring with this inflection point of AI. So really excited to dive into it, but also excited to really see how the users are going to react to that. Want to see, I mean, ultimately, super passionate about humans. I'm trying to predict, understand their behavior. It's something that I love to kind of look into. And it's also a bet on it to see how it changes and in how much time will it change. But yeah, it's exciting to be able to work on new technologies that open up doors that haven't been really there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I've worked on those projects before, and it's exciting to see how users are going to respond to your ideas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have very often big bets on the table like that. So when you have them, it's obviously extremely excited to jump into them. The teams are excited to work on things like that and looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So I guess just kind of bringing it all to a close here. You know that the name of this podcast is The Execution Gap, a podcast that explores why business strategy fails and how the top 10% of leaders close that gap. And your many years of experience, what's one gap that you've seen time and time again, and how have you learned to close that gap? And what advice would you give to other leaders who may be facing a similar situation, whether it's building trust with customers, creating the right structure in teams, or knowing when to slow down and focus on strategy?
Yeah, I mean, there could be so many angles to kind of approach this, but I think one of the gaps that, well, I've been guilty of it, and I see a lot of leaders trying to or struggling with it is trying to do too much at the same time. And instead of just focusing on a single path and just kind of committing to that, getting it over the line in an iterative way, testing as you go. It's trying to kind of do these parallel tracks of too many things at the same time. It's like, somebody said this, and I really loved it. It's like herding cats, right? You're trying to push a herd of cats forward. Ultimately, strategy usually doesn't fail because it's wrong. It fails because it lacks clarity. And I'll bring it back to this ruthless clarity and disciplined iteration that we should have to be able to ultimately close that gap. And execution is critical, but ultimately building that trust with your team, having that clarity to go through things, it's what ultimately brings everything together.
No, that's sound advice for other leaders out there. So hopefully they take note on that. So just to kind of wrap up, then Daniel, what's when you're not busy being the VP of product at Revive, I mean, what do you like to do in your free time?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with a quote by Vince Lombardi, and any American football fans out there, they'll know who Vince Lombardi is first,
Yeah.
and then they'll understand that I'm probably a little bit of an American football fan, which is it's an odd one for somebody living in Romania, so far away from the heart of American football. But Lombardi was saying something like God, family, and the Green Bay Packers in that order. And it was again, it was something that was pushing priority, and it's linking back to our discussion, right? It's really having structure in your life and having a priority. And for me, it's faith, family, and friends. And faith is a grounding factor. It gives me clarity and purpose and a sense of identity beyond, let's say, who I am as a what I do in my professional life. I think that's important. It gives a sense of perspective. If I'm not doing this tomorrow, I still understand and have a sense of my identity. Family, I mean, it gives me perspective, kind of keeps me away from my workaholic tendencies. I love my work, and any chance I get, I'll go back and double down into, I don't know, cloud code or something. I'll do something on the side all the time. But then my family kind of brings that perspective of what really matters and the things that are important in life. And then friends sounds good because it's three F's, right? So faith, family, and friends. But it's about relationships, and ultimately that piece in that friends piece, I would say it's relationships, and um, kind of that keeps me grounded and balanced, and not forget myself in the work, which I love. Again, I love it, but I understand that there's more to it, and ultimately that balance life kind of helps add some perspective to what we do. I had a colleague a few years back, and she was saying something like, well, we're not saving lives here, which for us it's true. Now, for other people, it might not be true, but for us it's true. And really understanding ultimately the responsibility that we have in what we do, but also trying to balance that with who we are. And then in spare time, watching American football as much as I can because of the time difference. I'll catch the early game, and yeah, Green Bay Packers will be my team there.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well said. And faith has been very much a core piece of who I am and my journey, and it's given me direction when I didn't feel like I had direction, and my family has been such a support throughout all I've been doing with my consultancy and just with my journey. And I love Sundays because we kind of put life on hold, and I love to put something in the crock pot and we gather around the table, and it's something that I definitely look forward to. It's Yeah, no, I appreciate your words. Yeah, no, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you on the show, and I really enjoyed our time together.